Episode 4 of HBO's Hard Knocks with the Chicago Bears finally got into some of the emotion we've been looking for from an otherwise uneventful Bears preseason that's lacked some of the drama we look for on Hard Knocks.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, we look back at the latest episode of Hard Knocks, admittedly delayed a little bit because Wednesday's podcast was the 53-man roster cut down, and then yesterday we had to talk about the subsequent moves with the practice squad and guys getting called up to the active roster. It's been a lot of personnel action that have kept us from getting to Tuesday night's Hard Knocks episode, where we didn't get all the drama of cut down day, but we did finally get into some of the emotion of the things surrounding the last preseason game. We got a little bit deeper on Ian Wheeler's story and the injury that cut his season short. We also got to know safety Adrian Colbert a little bit more and got to know some of his tragedy in his backstory. I mean, he survived, but some very difficult times for him growing up in this process. And finally, there's some real emotional substance there that we look to from Hard Knocks, because we've had a lot of what's felt like kind of filler content where maybe they're struggling to hit their full 55 minutes or however long a full episode is, and the Bears maybe haven't given them access, or maybe the Bears have limited some of what they've wanted to put on the air. We don't know that for sure, but you kind of get the feeling like the Bears have been strict about what Hard Knocks is and isn't allowed to put on the air because they're recording everything, and we're only getting just a couple of snippets of decent stuff. And we did still get some nuggets and some gems and some of the goods in terms of substantive football information from this episode as well. So we'll circle back to that as we get a little bit farther into today's episode. But I wanted to start with some of the meat that we actually got into from Hard Knocks. Because this is the stuff that we tune in for, especially when it's not your team, when it's, one of the other franchises. You come in to see the guy who you really fall in love with his story, and you're rooting for him along the way, and then he hits some adversity and you feel really bad for him. You emotionally connect with these football players that usually we don't even get to really see with their face and what they look like when they've got helmets and jerseys and pads on. They can sometimes get a little bit dehumanized when we just think of them as number 15 out there or number 33 or whatever the player is. It's a name and a number, not as much a face and a person. But we got to know the story of Adrian Colbert, the Bears' backup safety, who got emotional when he was talking about as a child. He was hit by a car. He was in a coma for a couple of weeks, was told he would never play football again, and going through that process and how that has shaped him as an adult and how he tries to really focus on being grounded and getting back to nature. And he got into some maybe interesting, stuff about energy, and he's got some crystals and stuff. And you got some of the sad emotion there, and then also some of the more personal side of players, whether you're into that stuff or not. It makes you a little bit more connected to Colbert. But the real pulling at the heartstrings was with Ian Wheeler, the undrafted rookie running back who deferred medical school to try out his football dream to play in the NFL, had a really strong training camp and preseason up until that Chiefs game when he goes down with a leg injury, turns out to be a torn ACL, and his season is over. And we got some really good moments along the way with Wheeler, right? The whole process here, if you take a step back, it's about building up the story and then hitting that adversity that kind of tears it back down, right? We enjoy the roller coaster ride of that. If you never built up Ian Wheeler, you wouldn't feel as strongly about it when it gets torn back down. And similarly, if you built him up but never had the teardown, you don't quite get the full emotional range experience there. You got to see the Bears running backs coach, the full running back coach, Chad Morton, and the assistant running backs coach, Jennifer King, like be that good cop, bad cop for him and push him hard and then be there to lift him up and give him a hard time and make fun of him and then celebrate him when he does good things, right? They were even helping him practice how he was going to do karaoke in front of the team, rehearsing his entrance. And they showed that clip of him doing the entrance. They had the smoke machine. He comes out in the tank top. At some point during the Chief Keef song he's performing, he threw a bunch of cash up in the air. Like, it was a party, and the coaches were there to help kind of bring him along through that process. And I think Chad Morton and Jennifer King were two of the best choices for this, just given the personality that Chad Morton has, and just kind of like the other side of that with Jennifer King being just such like a genuinely good person. Like, there aren't very many Bears coaches that I can say I've personally met and had conversations with, but I talked to Jennifer King certainly at the NFL Combine this past year, right when she had just joined this Bears coaching staff. Genuine, down-to-earth, great human being who just loves the sport of football and loves helping coaching and teaching and making players better. Like, she's a great person and a great fit on this Bears coaching staff. And we like get so much more of that out of Hard Knocks. Like, that's what we want, right? We want to get to know these coaches and these players. And then it all comes crashing down with the torn ACL, where, like, first of all, Ian Wheeler gets tackled, twists, a helmet hits his knee, tears his ACL. He stands up and like just kind of limps a little bit off the field. He's not hobbling on one leg. Like, he's just walking with a limp, sits down on the sideline, is obviously aware that it's serious, but ends up walking under his own power back to the locker room with a torn ACL. Like, that is very impressive when you see how he physically just like, yes, you could tell on his face that he knew something bad had happened, but like, to be able to just like, oh yeah, ACL's torn, I'm going to literally walk it off the field and walk it to the locker room before you even get that full diagnosis. They're not carted off or anything like that. And of course, they kept checking in with mom in the stands, and once he got hurt, she was pretty devastated, and it all sort of climaxes with the scene outside of the locker room after the game when he walks out. She knows the injury, what it was, and they embrace and hug. This long, crying, emotional 30, 45-second scene of them really kind of talking through it a little bit and just letting all of that emotion out, and certainly gets you as the viewer to feel that, because you've already gotten to fall in love with Wheeler, and you get to know his mom a little bit and have that scene, and like that's the goods, right? That's what we really want. The underdog story we were all rooting for. And like, no one was rooting for it to crash down. We don't want it to crash down, but like, that's what storytelling brings out of us. And on top of that, like, the only other thing I'll add to that is that I couldn't help but think the whole time as I was watching that, can you imagine being the camera guy who has to stand there, who follows Wheeler's mom, outside through the whole game, and then you're literally just standing there in the tunnel of the Chiefs stadium. She's obviously crying and upset. Wheeler is crying and upset, and they're just standing there having this big emotional one-to-one moment. And there's a camera guy who's just standing there, just silently shooting the scene, just 3 feet away from this mother and son consoling each other over this difficult moment. Just silently holding the camera. How awkward of a feeling does that have to be for that camera guy or girl who is just doing their job? And it's not a criticism of them or whatever, but I put myself in that situation where like, it's just the third person in the room filming, and it's just that's cringe, this visceral cringe. I feel like where like, if I was that camera person, I'd be like, come on, like, do I have to hover right there with a camera like right in there? It feels a little bit paparazzi like, where it's like they're trying to enjoy this private, personal, emotional moment, and here I am holding up the big camera right next to them. It's not even like from a long distance where you zoom in and you at least create some physical space there. Like, those NFL tunnels are not super, super wide. That camera person had to just stand there, hold the camera, and that's tough. But it was finally something a bit more interesting and compelling in terms of storytelling that we've gotten from Hard Knocks through the first 3 episodes. And this episode had more examples of these kind of areas where the producers and the directors and stuff, like, they got to give us something, but it sure feels like the Bears aren't letting them give us everything they want to give us. And so we get some what feels more like filler stuff instead, that's either boring or just uninteresting or not really what we actually want, but close to what we actually want. So I want to go through some of the stuff that just didn't feel like it was giving us what we wanted, and where the Bears could have had some real influence on that next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. I love 5 Hour Energy because it's a quick and easy shot to give me that boost I need during the day. It doesn't have all that sugar or just the pure volume that some of the other like big cans of energy drinks do that people drink to get the same effect, but I can just, boom, take it out all with my 5 Hour Energy. Literally, zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. If you go to the 5 Hour Energy website, they have a bunch of different flavors that you might not even find at your local store. Watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There is a flavor for everybody, so try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and can't be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Get your 20% off with code LOCKEDONFB at 5hourenergy.com. Hard Knocks has so much potential to give us all the cool background and behind the scenes info on how the Bears are evaluating their team, evaluating practice, evaluating games. And we've seen other teams be a lot more willing than the Bears to give us that stuff. And so it's hard to not just conclude then that it is the Bears who are limiting what Hard Knocks will show us of that stuff, as opposed to Hard Knocks not getting that footage or choosing themselves not to give it to us, right? So the reason I word it that way is because, like, for example, you've not heard a single curse word on an episode of Hard Knocks this season. And that could be something you assume, like, oh, maybe did the Bears say, hey, no, we want it clean if you're covering our Chicago Bears? And the director or producer, I don't remember, one of the people running Hard Knocks this season said in an interview with CHGO, I think, I apologize if I'm giving them improper credit. I think The Athletic did an interview with them and CHGO did as well, and I'm not sure on which outlet this was given, but the Hard Knocks team decided themselves not to include any uncensored swear words this season, out of respect to the McCaskey family, that apparently, you know, like George and them, like, don't swear and don't like swearing, and that they didn't ask Hard Knocks to not air curse words, but that the directors and them chose themselves to not air curse words this season. I have to take them at their word at that. I don't know that I 100% trust that, but I trust that they said it. I trust that the outlets reported that it said that person in the interview said that. I'm not sure whether that person in that interview was, I mean, I can only assume they were being honest about it, but you can't help but wonder a little bit because we just aren't getting a lot of the kind of juicy goods that we want when it comes to, like, roster evaluation. Like, they had a clip from the team meeting room where Ryan Poles asked the running backs coach, like, hey, you know, if you could only keep 3 of those guys, which 3 would you want to keep? And then we don't get the answer. We just get that Ryan Poles asked him. Or, like, we had a scene where the quarterback's coach is like, like going through, like, kind of like grades and goes, you know, Bajent was 100% on technique and did everything we wanted from him from the game. Boom. Brett Rippon was 100% on technique and really did a good job. Like, we get, like, a couple of little positive evals here, and we get the kind of questions they're asking in these rooms, but we don't get any of the, like, this player was bad, or we're going to keep this guy but not that guy. Like, none of the actual goods that we want to hear. And I think by contrast, like, even just earlier this summer when the New York Giants did the off-season edition of Hard Knocks, you know, they were in the room with the Giants general manager evaluating free agents. It's like, hey, you know, do we want to bring back Barkley? Here's our evaluation of Barkley. Here's our evaluation of DeAndre Swift. We got to see how they viewed Swift in comparison to Barkley and how the negotiations went. They said, yeah, the Bears are talking to him, and a couple of the Eagles were talking to Swift. And I don't remember what the exact word, but, like, they gave away information that otherwise we would not have known, that maybe the team, you know, wouldn't have made public on their own, but they decided, hey, you know what? It's not the end of the world if Hard Knocks puts this out there. And for us as the viewers, like, we get that real behind the scenes access that we want. And in years past on the training camp Hard Knocks, they'll show the GM and the coaches talking about players they're going to cut or how they're evaluating different guys along this process so that we at home get to see like, man, they really actually weren't that high on this player who we thought they really liked, or they were much higher on this player than we thought that they didn't like based on the training camp reps. Like we usually get snippets and stuff like that that don't even really give away any competitive disadvantage to the team, right? Like you're not going to have another general manager watch that episode of Hard Knocks and go, oh, turns out the Bears actually didn't really like Jatari Carter that much. And then they ended up cutting him, of course. And like, oh, now I have this inside info from Hard Knocks and I can make my roster decisions different. Like it's not that important. And yet it means so much to us, right? Like the things that don't mean that much to the Bears in terms of competitive advantage can still be that kind of cool inside info that we want because we watch this team and we consume this team and we really want to see what they can do. And we just got none of it throughout this process. Like they just give us a little snippet of like, hey, we've got the footage. See, here's Ryan Poles asking the question, but we're not going to show you the answer. And I can't imagine that's Hard Knocks that's the director's decision to say, yes, we're not going to give you any of the goods because clearly they have it. And that's then got to be the oversight of the Bears as an organization saying, no, we don't want you to have that. We don't want you to have this. So instead, we get like 5 minutes of the backup quarterbacks at the Sears Tower. And like, don't get me wrong. Part of Hard Knocks is players doing stuff off the field, going around town, having fun, having a good time. Like they did a clip of Rome Odunze and John Jackson. They went to the grocery store to buy candy, I think, for the team and stuff. Like, okay, they're palling around at the grocery store. Like that's fun stuff. I get it. And we got a little bit of that with the quarterbacks. But like the last shot of the Sears Tower scene was a camera that like zoomed up on them on the glass. I don't remember what they call this. Like at the very top floor of the tallest building in Chicago, you can step out onto like outside in an enclosed glass panel. So the floor is glass and you can look down from like, 130 stories up or whatever the actual height of the floor is up there. And it's a cool like tourist thing to do. And you got to do it once. If you've never been to Chicago, like you got to do it and see it. And the players did it. And that's cool. But like we had like a 45-second shot of a camera zoomed in on them and then just really, really slowly zooming out of the Sears Tower. Like they killed 5 minutes of that episode just on the three quarterbacks looking out the window of the Sears Tower. And like we could have done that in 30 or 45 seconds, said, okay, Sears Tower, ooh, scared of heights. Ooh, the glass floor is kind of creaky when you step on it. All right, great, back to football. Like that would have been perfect. But you can tell they're not allowed to use a lot of other stuff. So it's like, all right, we'll spend 5 minutes in the Sears Tower. We'll spend 5 minutes at the Woodman's grocery store. They even showed this clip of like they were working on spiking the football with Caleb Williams. Like it reminds me of the last episode where we spent a lot of time talking about long snapping and holding on field goals. Like Hard Knocks usually has a lot more interesting, compelling storytelling and behind-the-scenes football stuff. And here they've had to really kind of focus just in on whatever they can get and whatever they can find interesting. And and sometimes it's just like stuff that feels not quite misleading, but just like omission of stuff. Like we got a big focus on Ian Wheeler, like we were talking about, and Velus Jones transitioning to running back. And they frame that whole thing as like, it's Velus Jones versus Ian Wheeler. Who's going to make the 53-man roster? Can Ian Wheeler earn the spot? Can Velus Jones earn a spot at running back? And the answer was Travis Homer. Like the Travis Homer was listed as a running back on this 53-man roster depth chart. Velus Jones was listed as a wide receiver. They never once talked to Travis Homer. I don't think they mentioned Travis Homer by name. Certainly not in episode 4. And I don't think over the course of Hard Knocks have we heard a single word from or about Travis Homer in this running back room, despite his familiarity with the coaching staff and the fact that he made the team. Like we've gone through Hard Knocks not knowing one of the running backs that made the team that was competing with the other guys that we were focused on whether or not they would make the team. Like I'm not saying you had to do a whole expose episode just on the background of Travis Homer, but it feels weird that they focus so much on those two guys and didn't even mention like, hey, yeah, there's a third guy competing with him and that guy actually ends up winning. Like the fact if Homer ends up getting cut, okay, fine. You don't have time to go in detail on all 90 players on the roster. I get it. But like if we're focusing in on one position battle here, you can't just leave out one of the key players in that battle who won the battle. Like I don't know how you're supposed to now explain that in episode 5 and be like, oh, hey, actually, yeah, sorry. We forgot to mention in the first 4 episodes, the first month you've been watching this, oh yeah, there was also this other running back the whole time, and he made the team instead. Whoops, sorry. Okay, never mind. Back next on to the next position. Like that, just stuff like that where Hard Knocks had so much more potential to give us more. I think the Bears restricted a lot of it. I think they had to do a lot of filler content, and there's little things like that you just wish like they could have got a little bit more of a more complete picture of things that were going on. All that being said, even in these episodes, we still get some interesting football nuggets that help us understand the team and the direction and the roster a little bit more. So I want to go through some of the goods that we actually did get here that are either interesting or informative or just give us a lot more information about this team and these players. Next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So despite a lot of filler kind of content or just snippets of stuff and stuff like, I wouldn't call it boring because none of the episodes is boring, but it's just like, despite the unmet potential, unfulfilled potential, and perhaps unmet expectations for what Hard Knocks could give us, we got some stuff that I think lends a little bit more of that value to why you tune in, because you want to pick up the little nuggets and gems that they get sprinkled in there that the Bears do allow to hit the HBO airwaves. Like, for example, they talked early in this episode about because the episode is sort of like a week behind where we are all the time. They had to recap the second preseason game at Soldier Field before they could get into the third preseason game, the week 2, but I guess the third game. The home game at Soldier Field against the Bengals before the road game against the Chiefs. So they were still talking about coming off of the home game against the Bengals, where Rome Odunze had that play in the back of the end zone where he caught it, but his feet were very clearly out of bounds. And, the wide receivers coach was like kind of ripping into him a little bit. It was like, hey, they were doing like a debrief with the coaches and the front office people. They were like, wide receivers coach was like, really disappointed in Rome on that play. Like, he made some great plays in this game, but he's got to have better awareness. He's got to know where the back of the end zone is. And then Ryan Poles says, well, hey, did you see the paint? Did you notice anything in the back of the end zone, the paint of the end zone, which, we had all talked about, and I think the wide receiver coach knew it too, but the fact that Ryan Poles made a point to say, hey, the back of the end zone line wasn't fully filled in with paint. It was there was a thin line marking the back of the end zone, but usually you get a 2 or 3 yard thick border around the back and side of the end zone. So it really is a contrast between the back of the end zone and where like the field goal post is, et cetera. And that was not filled in. So I think even in Radunze's peripheral vision, he might see more green under his feet than he would think if it was going to be white under his feet for the painting of what's actually outside the back of the end zone. But for Ryan Poles to take a second in that meeting to point that out and make a point of being like, hey, like, we don't have to be that hard on Radunze. He didn't say it, but like the feeling was like, hey, like, yeah, we can be disappointed in Rome, but also there's a good explanation for that. Like I thought that was a good insight into Ryan Poles and him paying attention and noticing these kind of things and how it's not just us on the outside saying, hey, was that a factor? It's the Bears acknowledging, yes, that was definitely very much a factor there. We also heard during the running back competition stuff with the coach Chad Morton and Jennifer King that Chad Morton used the phrase, hey, Velus, you're a running back now. Or he said, you're a running back now, Velus. Keep those feet right. Like to me, that exact wording makes it seem like Velus Jones is a running back now. Like not just for now, but like it's like the way he delivered that just felt more permanent or at least indefinite, right? Because on the initial 53, Velus Jones was listed with the wide receivers. So we're all kind of wondering, like, is he gonna play running back during the regular season? Is he gonna play receiver? Is it gonna be some of both? Like Chad Morton said, you're a running back now, Velus. Keep those feet right. Like, hey, this is you now. So this is what you got to do moving forward, as opposed to like you're trying out. Hey, if you're gonna be a running back, you got to do this. He's saying, no, you're a running back now. You got to do this. And it's like that language and that tone felt a little bit more like decisively permanent. You're a running back now, as in not a wide receiver. I do imagine he'll play both in the regular season. He'll line up in the backfield sometimes. He'll line up at receiver. I think they don't want defenses to know where he's going to be, where it's like they have to have the threat of any given time. This guy could count as a receiver. He could count as a running back. And that versatility is part of the threat to keep defenses from knowing, do you have a running back on the field on this play, or is he a wide receiver? And could you have more than one running back, more than one ball carrier there? Like that's part of the game here. So I don't think he's going to be traditionally placed into either category, but still, like, seems to me that's a very serious thing than not just like we're going to put him back at wide receiver after having tried this stuff out. We also got some of the cool like player to player and player to coach connections throughout this. They had footage of Caleb Williams talking to Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Mecole Hardman before the game. Before that last preseason game that Caleb didn't play in, but some good footage of them chatting, and Hardman had clearly watched Hard Knocks because he was talking to Caleb. Was like, yeah, I saw you said that you don't get nervous. You don't get nervous before games. And Caleb's like, yeah, not really. And Mecole Hardman was like, you're going to get nervous before that first game. You're going to be nervous, man. Like they're trying to warn him. Like, and that was just kind of a cool, like mic'd up situation that we didn't hear on the broadcast and to get to see anywhere else, that Hard Knocks is able to give us that access. And Caleb's like, we'll see, maybe a little bit. Like, it was very friendly and back and forth, but it's just kind of a cool connection between two players that I don't know of any real off-field connection between Mecole Hardman and Caleb Williams. Like, Hardman was at Georgia and he's like 4 years older. Like, I don't know that there's a big college background connection. I don't think they're like, I don't know how else they would know each other. It might just be two guys who know who each other are, but they're not like friends. So like that kind of connection where you wouldn't expect those players to connect that way was something really interesting. Or like they had a scene on the sideline of Tyson Bagent and Caleb Williams after Bagent scored a touchdown against the Chiefs, and Bagent and them like, high-fived and stuff. And Bagent tells Caleb Williams, man, he's like, man, I've learned a lot from you. Like, the older quarterback tells the rookie quarterback, I've learned a lot from you, man. And Caleb Williams responded, was like, yeah, I've learned a lot from you too. Like it was mutual there, but it was a cool sort of thing where it's like, yeah, even the rookie can teach the second year guy a few things. And that relationship is very much back and forth, right? Not just like mentor and student, but very much like, hey, we help each other get better. And we certainly saw Bagent have such a strong preseason, having gone through a lot of that process. And there was a cool moment too where Austin Reed, he scores a touchdown in his last preseason game and gets an opportunity there. He goes up to Shane Waldron at the end of that game and says, hey man, no matter what, I appreciate you investing in me. And that was a real cool, like warm sort of moment of like, yeah, I think Austin Reed knew he was the fourth string quarterback, probably not going to make this 53-man roster, hoping to get on the practice squad. But hey, you know what? Like, he can still appreciate that the Bears didn't have to have him as that fourth quarterback. The Bears didn't have to play him in those preseason games. They could have played Rippon as the third the entirety through the end of the game and never played Reed. But like he has that gratitude and that humility to say, hey, like, thank you for investing in me and helping and coaching me and trying to make me better. Like, those are the kind of cool moments that we don't get to pick up otherwise as well. And to give credit to the Hard Knocks people, I know I feel like I've been crapping on them a lot for stuff that was boring or filler content. I thought from a director standpoint, they did a really good job playing on the contrast before the Chiefs game of like, they had Adrian Colbert, the safety we talked about earlier. He has these sound bowls where you like rub a mortar, or like, how you would make like pesto, like the mortar in the bowl kind of thing. Like you rub the stone around the bowl and it rings kind of like a bell. And he was like meditating to these different sounds and being at peace. And it was very much this like kind of quiet, calm, meditative peace. And then they would cut to Tyson Bagent's dad, Travis Bagent, the world champion arm wrestler, doing arm wrestling in Kansas City for a competition before the game. And he's, hyped up, pumped up, yelling, screaming, growling, grunting, arm wrestling. And then they'd cut to Colbert, in the peaceful, calm serenity. And then it's Travis Bajan, energy, arm wrestling, and then back, and like playing with that contrast of like, some guys need to get hyped up, some guys need to calm themselves down and ground. Like, that was good television. That's good storytelling. That's really well done. So I want to make sure I give them credit. Like, that's not like football gems or like good, information that we really needed to know, but like, that was good storytelling and good Hard Knocks there. And then the last one quickly was Ryan Poles when he was informing Ian Wheeler that he was going to be placed on injured reserve. Like, he told him, hey, man, my door is always open. My phone is always on. If you want to talk, if you want to cry, like, I've been there before. I'm here for you. And I'm not just your boss, or I'm not just, your boss's boss's boss. I'm not just the GM. Like, I'm a person and I get it. And like, I'm here for you. Like, very cool human moment between general manager and undrafted free agent that just makes Ryan Poles that much more likable and shows you the culture of the organization that permeates from the top down. Like, that stuff makes it easier to trust in and believe this team and the leadership of this organization right now. Like, that is another thing that like Hard Knocks is great for. It was genuine. It was real. It's not like PR fluff there. Like, that's a real moment that we got to see on camera. And I'm glad the Bears let us have that one, even though it seems like the Bears aren't letting us have some of the other stuff. Like, to be clear, like, more of my disdain or my criticism of this season of Hard Knocks is more about what the Bears are giving them as opposed to what the people at Hard Knocks are doing. I want to make that clear. They're doing their best with what they can, and I get it. It's a hard job to do. I don't mean to knock them for it. All right, enough of the bad Hard Knocks puns. The Bears finished up their last practice before they get some time off, and then they'll have game week against the Tennessee Titans. So this team is set. A couple other little practice squad changes, but we can start turning our attention more fully to the regular season. We'll get set some expectations for this Bears team, for individual Bears players, and start previewing Bears-Titans Week 1 coming up next week on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for your second listen, why don't you check out our NFL divisional previews? We've had our NFL division previews for the NFC North here. It was added Thursday night to the Locked On Bears podcast feed. There was a bonus episode in there where all four hosts of the Locked On NFC North shows, me, Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, your favorite, Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, and Matt Deary from Locked On Lions, all got together and looked at some of the biggest storylines and previewed the season across the NFC North. So go take a listen to that if you have not yet. But we've got our entire 2024 Locked On NFL season preview covering every division across the league with all 32 NFL hosts covering these teams every day. The full 8 episodes of all the divisions will stream live on the 24/7 Locked On NFL YouTube channel and our Amazon Fire TV app. Catch all the action next Tuesday, September 3rd, starting at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Each episode will air in order there. The Locked On NFL season preview, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming back Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again. And in exchange, I'll always leave you with another opportunity to bear down.